evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another edition, or should I say the first edition, of Texas Football Recruiting Weekly, a 30 to 45 minute show every Wednesday or Thursday from yours truly. My name is Michael Ween, giving you all the latest in Texas recruiting, the latest commitments, the latest news and rumors, what I'm hearing on Texas recruiting. Welcome to the first edition of Texas Football Recruiting Weekly. It's Wednesday, August 7th, 9:45 p.m. Central Time. I'm coming to you live from a beautiful post-hurricane barrel, Houston, Texas. Here on a Wednesday night, the night on a day that was jam-packed full of news for the Texas Longhorns football program. The unfortunate news being that projected starting running back C.J. Baxter, who was going into his sophomore season, unfortunately is out for the season, reportedly with a torn PCL and LCL, the ACL still being intact. So it's not a total knee restructure that he's going to need, but he is out for the season with an LCL and PCL tear. He's going to need surgery, and the recovery time is such that he will miss the entirety of the 2024 season. How much does that change for this Texas Longhorns season? How much does it change the overall expectations for the season? That's not what we're here to talk about tonight. But it is, in my eyes, a significant loss. And it needs to be acknowledged. That was the bad news of today. He's going to need surgery. It's a 6 to 9 month recovery period. So he's going to miss the season. That's the unfortunate news. But earlier today, before that news was reported on the C.J. Baxter health front, Texas football landed their first 5-star commitment of the 2025 recruiting cycle. This one is a big one, folks. The Texas football program, Steve Sarkisian and Chris Jackson in particular, Chris Jackson being the wide receivers coach, landed a commitment from 5-star wide receiver from Saxe High School in the state of Texas. Kaliq Lockett announced his commitment to the University of Texas, the first 5-star commitment for Texas in the 2025 recruiting cycle. This coming on the heels, a little over a month after the number one player in the state of Texas and the number one receiver overall in the country, consensus-wide, DeCorian Moore from Duncanville High School, spurned Texas to commit to Oregon, when for months people thought that he was a lock to Texas. And at that time, funny enough, people weren't sure that Kaliq Lockett, of the three big guys that we've been talking about, was going to end up at Texas. People weren't sure of his interest in Texas, but I think his official visit changed things. And so I'm going to get into all of it, what this means, how big of a commitment really is it, what's the significance of it, what do I see Kaliq Lockett really being at the college level, and hopefully at some point here in the next 25 minutes, while we talk about this commitment and give it the attention that I think it deserves, Emmy Nixon will join me for a little bit to give his thoughts on Kaliq Lockett's commitment to Texas. So, thank you guys for tuning in. It's been a busy Wednesday on the Texas football front, both from a recruiting standpoint and, unfortunately, from a health standpoint, as C.J. Baxter a super blue chip running back from the 2023 recruiting class, went down yesterday at practice with what's now officially an LCL PCL tear in his right knee. He will be out for the entirety of this upcoming season, forcing Jadon Blue, Trey Wisner, and maybe the freshmen from the 2024 recruiting class, Jarrett Gibson and Christian Clark, to step up into more significant roles than originally thought. But he's out for the season in some unfortunate news for this Texas football team. An injury that will require surgery. But on the positive front, Texas gets the commitment of Kaliq Lockett. So who is Kaliq Lockett? If you don't follow recruiting, you probably don't know who he is. You may have heard of him before if you follow the Texas Longhorns or you slightly follow recruiting. He is a 5-star wide receiver, generally thought of as the 3rd or 4th best wide receiver in the 2025 recruiting class from Saxe High School here in the state of Texas. 24/7 has him as a 5-star, the number 12 overall rated prospect nationally, and the number 5 overall rated prospect in the state of Texas for the 2025 recruiting class. The 24/7 composite has him rated as a 5-star, the number 20 overall player nationally, and the number 6 overall player in the state of Texas. Now, On3, which is another industry recruiting service that does rankings, actually has him rated as a mid 4-star, which I just don't get. And I'm sure that will change when the next recruiting rankings updates happen. The number 21 player nationally, though, as lots of these services this early on in the process still haven't given out all their 5 stars that they're eventually going to give out. So if I had to bet, On3 will have him eventually rated as a 5-star prospect. And the number 6 overall player in the state of Texas. So while they have him as a mid 4-star right now, they have him as a borderline top 20 player in the country nationally and the number 6 overall player in the state of Texas. Meaning, if these rankings stay status quo and he doesn't fall significantly from here to signing day, which is in early December, he will be a 5-star on 3, like he is on 24/7. But he is a 5-star in the On3 industry ranking, which is very similar to the 24/7 composite ranking. So in those respects, he is considered a 5-star prospect. Rivals has him as a mid 4-star. Again, I don't understand that. They have him rated a little bit lower nationally, but still as a super blue chip kind of guy, number 65 nationally, and a borderline top 10 player in the state of Texas at number 11 in the state. And ESPN also has him as a mid 4-star, but number 23 nationally and number 6 in the state of Texas. So what does all this mean? I think by the end of the process, once senior year evaluations are in play, as long as he doesn't suffer any significant injury, knock on wood, or nothing weird happens, Kaliq Lockett will be considered a 5-star prospect by at least 3 of the 4 major recruiting services, if not all 4. I think he's that special. And the rankings would tell you, based on where he's ranked nationally, inside the top 25 nationally by 3 of the 4 major services right now, and inside the top 8 in the state of Texas by 3 of the 4 recruiting services right now, that if those recruiting rankings hold, he will be a 5-star by most of the recruiting services. So regardless of what those rankings say or don't say right now, what really matters is where he's ranked after his senior season of high school, which will start here in a couple weeks. And like most highly rated prospects, he's getting his decision out of the way so that he can focus on his senior season. Who was in play for Kaliq Lockett? Now that you kind of have the layout of who Kaliq Lockett is, who was in play? Well, he chose Texas over some major programs. Texas A&M was absolutely in play for Kaliq Lockett. In fact, a couple months ago, it was thought that they led. They were the leaders in the clubhouse for Kaliq Lockett at one point. He took an official visit to Texas A&M on June 7th. Okay? LSU. We know the kind of receiver history they have at LSU of putting elite of the elite guys in the NFL. Was also in play for Kaliq Lockett, much like they were with DeCorian Moore and are with Jamie French, another 5-star wide receiver that will make his decision at the end of August. Kaliq Lockett was interested in LSU. He took an official visit to LSU at the end of May 31st. Florida State was interested in Kaliq Lockett. At the end of the day, they were kind of on the back burners, but he did take an official visit there on June 14th, the week after he went to A&M. That's interesting. They were in play. Alabama was recruiting Kaliq Lockett. He took an official visit to Alabama again once. This was after they made the coaching change from Nick Saban to Kalen DeBoer. Shortly after he visited Florida State. It was a midweek official visit, surprisingly, on June 17th. But his last official visit, and this doesn't happen always in recruiting, but most of the time, it's a big advantage to get the last official visit or the last visit from a prospect of this nature, because the last visit is likely the visit that's going to stick with the most in their mind than, say, the first or second visit that they take. And so I think having the last visit for Texas that weekend of June 21st through the 23rd was big, and that changed a lot in this recruitment, because at the end of the day, what this came down to today was, according to sourcing throughout the industry, was Texas or Alabama. And Kaliq Lockett ended up choosing Texas. That's huge. So now you kind of know where he's rated, where I think he's going to end up being rated, and who were the schools in play, and who did he actually choose Texas over? Like, who was the real competition? So now let's talk about Kaliq Lockett. Who is he on the football field? Why is he such highly thought of? When I think of receivers at the high school level, I always ask myself when I watch their huddle tape, what is their superpower? Do they have a quality? Do they have an ability that's special, that sets them apart from the other wide receivers? With Xavier Worthy, for example, I think the thing that set Xavier Worthy apart, maybe not so much when he was in high school, because he dealt with injuries in high school And he was actually signed at Michigan before he ended up at Texas. So he was a little bit of a weird journey to how he got to Texas. But at the college level, what made Xavier Worthy special was not only his speed, but his ability to get open, his ability to separate and get open. The speed aided in that ability significantly, but his ability to get in and out of breaks and separate at a really high level, to always be open, whether he would catch the ball or not, because he did have problems with drops for different reasons. It's not just that he sucks at catching the ball. He played through a broken hand in 2023 or 2022, 2 years ago. But that ability to separate and get open, I think, was Xavier Worthy's standout quality. With Decorian Moore, the number 1 overall prospect in the state of Texas, who committed to Oregon on the 4th of July, his quality is his explosiveness and his speed. Much like Xavier Worthy, similarly. I think Kaliq Lockett's special ability is or are his ball skills and body control. He is an A+++ in his ball skills, in the way that he controls his body, the way that he can contort his body to allow him to beat defenders on the ground or in the air. And his catch radius is what really stands out when you turn on the film. Any quarterback playing with him can put a ball in his vicinity, in his general zip code, and he'll go get it. And we'll see that when we watch the tape here in a little bit. But I think his bodily control and his ball skills, his ability to go up and catch the football in such a smooth fashion, to contort himself in the air, to catch the ball at different angles, is Kaliq Lockett's special ability. An ability that, in my opinion, takes him to that 5-star tier, that next level of prospect. And it's something that will translate at the next level because of his size. I think he's got a frame that he can build on. He can add some more weight. I think he will add more weight at the next level. But right now, he's about 6'2", 175. He's a bigger receiver. He's got some size to him. He's not small at all. I think his ball skills and bodily control are the things that separate him from the rest. One of the big reasons that he's rated and thought of so highly, like he is. I think there's a smoothness to his game, just watching him. He doesn't really have, not saying he's a bad athlete, but he doesn't have the outright speed or raw explosiveness at an elite level. He's got speed, and he is explosive. He can be explosive. He's explosive in different ways. He just doesn't have that elite speed. He's not a guy who's going to be running Xavier Worthy or Decorian Moore. He's not a track guy, is what I'm trying to say. That's not his elite skill. But there's a smoothness to the way he gets in and out of breaks, to the way he glides on these routes and after the catch, that just is beautiful to watch. What Kaliq Lockett specializes in, though, is big plays down the field, contorting his body, going up and catching the football, whether he's on the ground or in the air. Pinpointing the ball at the highest point, going up and catching it and bringing it down. And being able to control his body in such a way that allows him to do that in tight windows. That is something that I cannot wait to watch when he's playing alongside Arch Manning next year in Austin. I think Kaliq Lockett is just as valuable on 3rd and 4 in the red zone as he is on 1st and 10 from your own 35-yard line after a turnover or starting a new drive because of that ability. He can be a guy that you can throw those fade routes to in the end zone because of his special ability to go up and get the football. I was talking to a friend earlier, and he made a really good point because I sent him Kaliq Lockett's junior season highlights. And I think he put it really well when he said he's a ball attacker. That's 100% spot on. He goes up and he gets the football wherever it is, and he makes his quarterback better. Because at Saxe, and this is nothing against Saxe, but Kaliq Lockett wasn't playing with a borderline 5-star quarterback like DeCorian Moore had and still has in Keelan Russell at Duncanville. He wasn't playing with the talent around him, the high-level talent that Duncanville has at Saxe. He made his quarterback look good at multiple points and times in his highlight tape. You put the ball in his vicinity, and he's going to do his best to go up and get it. Again, what makes, when you evaluate these receivers at the high school level, what you really, I think you have to ask yourself is, what is that one trait? What are those 1 or 2 traits that make them special, that make them the 5-star prospect that they are thought to be? Xavier Worthy, I don't think was a 5-star coming out of high school, but again, he had a weird journey because he missed most of his senior year with an injury, and he was about to go to Michigan before he, at the last second, flipped to Texas. He was Sark's first recruit that he signed at Texas. That's a fun fact for you guys, but he was. But I said a little bit earlier, like Xavier Worthy's special quality, in my opinion, at the college level, and something that's going to translate in the NFL with the Chiefs, is his not only his speed, as he's the fastest player, period, in the history of the NFL Combine, as we know now, but his ability to separate, his route running, is just special. With Kaliq Lockett, when you watch the tape, it's his ball skills, his catch radius, and the ability to control his body in the air in tight windows, to go up and high point the football, to attack the ball at all angles. That is Kaliq Lockett's specialty. That's what makes him special, in my opinion. And again, there's a smoothness to watching Kaliq Lockett that's just so beautiful. And I think that's what makes him who he is. So, why does this matter? Why does getting Kaliq Lockett matters, aside from the fact that he's a special player, he's a 5-star prospect? Well, on a couple fronts, it's significant. Number one, this is a Texas recruiting class that, in my opinion, was in dire need of some electric skill talent that, number one, could take away the sting of losing out on DeCorian Moore last month when he committed to Oregon on July 4th, but also providing momentum for this class going forward. What's going to eventually vault Texas into the top 5-ish class that we all expect them to sign? they've signed or they have committed some really good prospects, which I'm not going to dive deep into right now, but I think there are some really good and talented players committed to Texas right now. But they don't have they didn't have the 5-star yet. They didn't have the guy that, like, last year when Colin Simmons committed on August 10th, the number 1 player in the state last year, the edge rusher out of Duncanville, that really vaulted Texas's momentum in what gave them a third straight top 5 class. What was going to be that essentially for Texas this year? They needed some momentum. And I think they're getting that in the commitment of Kaliq Lockett. Now, how does he affect other big recruitments individually? I don't know. I can speculate, and I'm not going to get into that right now, but I don't know how, like, Kaliq Lockett's commitment to Texas may affect Michael Fasusi's decision in 2 weeks' time. I don't know that. I don't know that it's going to affect Jamie French's decision on August 30th. Another 5-star wide receiver from Jacksonville, Florida. Good or bad, I don't know that Kaliq Lockett's decision affects Jamie French's decision. But I think this gives the Texas recruiting class a big boost, obviously, as he's the first 5-star in this class, officially thought of right now as a 5-star. He's the first one to be committed. And I think along with Lance Jackson, those are the two best, by far, the two best prospects committed in this Texas recruiting class right now. Because I think Lance Jackson, the edge rusher, could potentially end up a 5-star. I think he's really the only other guy in this recruiting class who has that profile. But this commitment really checks all the boxes. We're talking about a talent in Kaliq Lockett that I think's right up there with Jonte Cook and Ryan Wingo from the last 2 classes. This marks 3 consecutive classes that Texas has landed a wide receiver that was rated a 5-star by at least one of the 4 major recruiting services. Jonte Cook in the Arch Manning class back in 2023. He will be a sophomore this season. Ryan Wingo last year in the 2024 recruiting class, who will be a freshman this season and likely play a significant role. And then Kaliq Lockett to start off this year, 2025. He will be a freshman next season in what's supposed to be Texas's second season in the SEC and his first on the 40 acres as, as a freshman. And so when you think about what Texas could look like in theory next year, it could be Arch Manning with a combination of Jonte Cook as a junior, Ryan Wingo as a sophomore, and Kaliq Lockett vying for playing time. All 3 of those guys, as I mentioned, 5-stars, playing with Arch Manning alongside DeAndre Moore, who will likely come back. And some of these other younger guys, maybe a Matthew Golden, who will still have eligibility, returns, a guy who they got in the portal from Houston. But 3 5-star wide receivers, all playing into the start of the Arch era. That's something that you can get, I think, really, really excited about. And so with all that being said, I welcome in my fantastic co-host who's going to join me for the last 10-ish minutes of this first edition of Texas Football Recruiting Weekly. Mr. Amy Nexon, how are you tonight?
I'm good, man. Glad I could make it, just barely here. And it was good news today, right? I mean, Kaliq Lockett,
Absolutely.
big time commitment. Can't wait to see what he does in his senior year now that he's officially signed onto the program. But yeah.
Any thoughts on Kaliq Lockett as a player? I've been talking about him now for approximately 25 minutes. I've mentioned that I think his special skill are his ball skills, but particularly his catch radius and the way he's able to contort his body, go up, high point the football to really attack the football in the air in tight windows and come down with it. I think when you look at these high school wide receivers, you have to look at them in that way. That's the way I've kind of learned to look at them. When you watch them, do they have a special trait or couple traits that separate them from the rest of the pack? Because if they don't, I don't think they can be a 5-star prospect. But I think Kaliq Lockett has that. So do you have any thoughts on Kaliq Lockett as a player?
Yeah, definitely. I was listening to on Texas football's live stream of his decision, and the comparison that they were making on that show was Jalen Polk. And I agree with that. From seeing his highlights, from seeing that he's not really a speed guy. He's more of, as you said, kind of body control, like kind of, for lack of a better term, my ball bitch mentality, kind of like
Yep.
50-50 balls. Like that's going to be his specialty. And that's needed in the SEC. Like I think going against longer, lankier corners in the SEC, guys like Kaliq Lockett are a must.
Right. So I'll just we'll wrap the show like this. I think this has been a very good first edition of Texas Football Recruiting Weekly. And by the way, I'm planning to have this as a 30 to 45 minute max show every week almost. There will be a week or two here and there that we probably won't be able to make it, but every week, especially in the month of August when all these big time decisions are going down, as a place where you can get easily digestible instant analysis to big commitments like tonight, where you can get the intel that you want if you really want to follow Texas recruiting, whether that's at a very high level or a very minutia level. I'll make it so it's kind of for everybody, or I'll try. And so that this can be a separate haven for recruiting centric news than the stuff that we talk about on our regularly scheduled programming on Dit Hole as we jump into the football season, where we're going to be talking about the actual football that's taking place on the field, amongst other things. But it's once if we get baseball recruiting news or we get big basketball recruiting news, we'll also be discussing that here. So if you're into that kind of thing, this is the place for you. I'm going to say I can't guarantee it'll be Wednesday every week, but what I can say is it'll be Wednesday or Thursday every week. But here's how I'll wrap the Kaliq Lockett stuff. When you look at where he's rated right now, although he's only really a 5-star in the 24/7 rankings and in the 24/7 composite rankings, along with the On3 industry rankings. And although he's rated as a mid 4-star by Rivals, which again, I don't understand, but think that's going to change very soon. Although he's only a mid 4-star on ESPN, I think you can look at where they have him ranked nationally and in the state of Texas, and it will tell you that if those things hold through senior evaluations, which barring injury, I think they will, that he will end up as a 5-star prospect, or at the very least, a high 4-star super blue chip prospect by all 4 major recruiting services. And the reason that I think he's special, just like you mentioned, is he's a my ball bitch kind of guy. He's very smooth. He's not he doesn't have the elite Xavier Worthy speed or the elite trait of a Decorian Moore's explosiveness, but his ability to go up and contort his body in ways to catch the football if you put the ball anywhere in his vicinity and come down with it, and his ball skills make him the 5-star high level prospect that he is. And the reason I think that can translate to the next level in the SEC at the highest level of college football and in the NFL, because basically what they're saying, if they rate you as a 5-stars, they think you can be a first-round pick or at least a high draft pick, maybe a high second-round pick when it's all said and done, is because he's 6'2", 175. He's not a small guy. And I think there's room for him to add weight to his frame.
Right.
So at the end of the day, it came down to a group of 5 schools, but really only 2 were in real consideration when it came down to the nitty-gritty. It was Texas A&M, it was Florida State, it was LSU, it was Alabama, and it was Texas. At the end of the day, though, like I mentioned earlier, what this came down to was where he took his last 2 official visits, Alabama and Texas. And Texas wins out for a big-time receiver over Alabama, which is fantastic news. Any parting shots on the first ever edition of Texas Football Recruiting Weekly for you in terms of Kaliq
Parting
Lockett?
shots. I think the big thing I gotta reiterate is just like this is still very early on in this recruiting phase. Like this month of August is going to be a busy one for recruiting, but even with missing on Decorium Moore and a couple of these other guys here and there, Texas is still, I think, has the highest ranked class going into a season under Sark. And right now they're at I think they were at 15 before this signing, but I think they'll move up to 13 or 12 or something like that, which would be the highest a recruiting class has been going into a football season.
And we still have 3.5 weeks before the season starts.
Right.
There are going to be other big decisions that get announced before then. Some may go in Texas' favor, some may not. But I think this can jumpstart momentum that is needed for this class right now, because the expectation for Texas 3 years running now under Sark is top 5 class or something close to it. And Kaliq Lockett gets you started on that path. If you've tuned into this, thank you very much. Greatly appreciate it. The first edition of Texas Football Recruiting Weekly was a huge success. I hit the time mark I wanted to. I stayed under 45 minutes. Went in depth on the commitment of Kaliq Lockett, from his rankings to the schools that were in contention to who he is as a player, to getting Emmy's thoughts on what he thinks of Kaliq Lockett, to why it matters, to where I see him at the next level. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this. If you didn't know who Kaliq Lockett was before you watched this video, hopefully you do now. And hopefully you can go watch, and enjoy his junior season huddle highlights now that you know who he is. But Kaliq Lockett, excited to watch you in your freshman season. If you do sign in signing day in December, there are still some twists and turns that this recruitment could take. But for right now, he's a Longhorn. Excited to watch him alongside Jonte Cook and Ryan Wingo and whoever else is back from the Texas wide receiver room next year. Maybe a DeAndre Moore factors into that equation. Excited to watch him because he is a special kind of cat. So Kaliq Lockett, hook 'em horns. Welcome to the 40 acres. And we will see you next time, or next week, I should say, on Texas Football Recruiting Weekly. Peace out.
Peace.